Welcome to the second edition of When the Dodgers and Jints Played in New York. I'm Ralph Tyko, my Peter Trunk. He's on assignment this evening. My guest is Carl Erskine. What else can you say? Great Dodger pitcher in the 50s, World Series champion in 1955, and I'm honored to have you as a guest, Mr. Erskine.
Yeah, my pleasure always to recall those good years at Brooklyn. That never gets old for me.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that because as we talked a little bit off the air, I was a New York Giant fan. My partner in this is Peter Trunk. He was an avid Brooklyn Dodger fan, and over the years we've come to love each other's teams as much as we love our own teams because the memories are so wonderful. For us it was our youth, and for you it was just the beginning of adulthood. Actually, you were very young when you came up to the Dodgers. Tell me about how it came to be that you became a professional. What was the scouting process? Where were you playing, and how did you appeal to baseball so that they gave you the start?
Yeah. Well, it was a story that happened when I was 9 years old. I played my first baseball game in the city parks of my hometown, which is Anderson, Indiana. Now, if you don't know where Anderson, Indiana is, we're 30 miles northeast of Indianapolis, so we're right in the middle of the state of Indiana, which, of course, has a reputation as a basketball state. And
Absolutely.
I did play basketball in high school, and that was the big sport in my hometown. But I did play baseball in the park leagues, and then as I got older and moved up in the school years to high school, the coach called me in. The high school coach called me in and said, I think I was 13 years old. He said, I want you out for baseball. And he'd seen me, I guess, play in the park leagues. Now, I'm a very average-sized kid. I wasn't very big, thin, and kind of average, not real small, but I was not big. But I could throw hard, even when I was pretty young. So I got to play on the varsity when I was a freshman. I lettered 4 years in baseball. But during the summertime, we played American Legion baseball after school was out. So I played on the American Legion team from my hometown and played an East Chicago team one time in a tournament. I was a sophomore in high school. And I struck out about 20 guys in this tournament. I got a big team from Hammond, Indiana, a lot of Polish boys, big boys. But I struck out a lot of guys. And afterwards, two gentlemen, shirts and ties, came to see me off the side at the dugout and gave me a card, and it said Chicago Cubs on it. Oh, gee whiz. These were two scouts. And they said, son, we'd like to come speak to your father and you about signing into pro baseball. Now, in those days, there was no draft, and teams could sign players when they're 15, 16 years old. There was no protection. There was nothing like today where you have only the drafts. You can, be selected. But anyway, so they offered me a contract, but I didn't want to quit school. So I stayed in school and then played through my senior year and graduated in 1945. But the war was on, and I got drafted into the Navy. But during my last 2 years in high school, the scouts came around a lot. And there were several teams that had scouts following me, and my catcher, Jack Rector, was a fine prospect as well. But the Dodgers invited me to New York right after graduation, along with my buddy, and we went and worked out at Ebbets Field. Well, I didn't want to play for anybody else ever except the Dodgers after I got to do that thrilling experience of going to New York and working out with the Dodgers for a week. But I had
Were you a Cub fan when you were a kid?
Yeah, the Cubs were big in my household. My mother was a big Cub fan, and it was we were closer to Cincinnati than we are Chicago. But the Cubs in those years had a lot of colorful players, and my mother and dad, they had a great announcer.
Brickhouse and
before Brickhouse, Bob Elston.
Really?
Bob Elston was.
I remember the name. Yes.
Was a broadcaster, and he was a famous name. And in those days, there's no television yet, so people listened to these games, and all the excitement came through the radio, and you had your own vision of what was going on. But the announcers became household people because they brought these games daily into your house. So Bob Elston kind of hooked my family on the Cubs. And we'd go to Cincinnati and see the Cubs play periodically when I was just a kid. But anyway, I went to the Navy, and while I was in the Navy, I was stationed at the Boston Navy Yard for a while. And I was throwing batting practice for the Braves, who at that time were the Boston Braves. This was 1945, 46, right in there. And they tried to sign me, but I didn't want to sign with the Braves. But finally, Mr. Rickey came up and to Boston, and we sat down, and I signed my first contract. So I did sign with the Dodgers. Then I played in the minors. When I discharged from the Navy, I got in the middle of the summer of 1946. I went to Danville, Illinois, which was one of their minor league teams. And then I played a winter season in Havana, Cuba. Came back and went to Double-A, which was Fort Worth, Texas. And at Fort Worth, I got to pitch against a preseason game against the big Dodgers. Their affiliate was Fort Worth, Texas, in the Texas League. And the big Dodgers, the real team, came and played a spring training game in 1948. And I pitched the front end of that game, the first 5 innings or so. And I did okay. I did well. But anyway, when the game was over, a voice said, "Where's Erkine?" And it was Jackie Robinson. Now, he was only in his second year. He'd been Rookie of the Year in 47. But in the spring of 48 now, so he came over to the Fort Worth dugout, and he said, "Where's Erkine?" And I stepped out and shook hands with Jackie Robinson, who I'd never met. And he said, "Young man, I hit against you twice today in this game. You're not going to be in this league very long with that stuff." And sure enough, I won 15 games by the middle of July in the Texas League, and I was called to the Dodgers. And the first guy to my locker when I joined him was Jackie. He said, "I told you couldn't miss." So we bonded pretty quick as friends and teammates, and then I played with Jackie 9 seasons. So, but that was kind of my route to the big leagues, and then.
Who told you you were being called up? When you got called up, how'd you get the word, and what were you thinking?
Well, I was in Fort Worth playing in Tulsa, and Leo DeRocher was the manager of the Dodgers, and he wanted me to come up because he needed pitching real bad. And I was pitching very well in the minors, but Mr. Rickey said he's too young. He's only had 1 season in the minor leagues. I'm not going to bring him up. He's not ready. And so Leo was really pushing to get me to come up. And the guy that was his chief scout was Burt Shotten. And Burt Shotten kept calling in from the minor leagues where he'd watch me, follow me. And he told me in Tulsa one day, he said, "Well, I got some news for you, Carl. I finally convinced the Dodgers that you're ready." And so Burt Shotten was the guy that, and almost at the same time, DeRocher got fired. And
Shotten took over. So when I went to the big leagues then, in the next few days, Burt Shotten was the interim manager. So, oh, wow.
So I came up, up in mid-July of 1948, the middle of season 1948. I joined the team.
And this is where we came in. We talked a little off the air earlier in the day, and I kind of joked with you, asked you if you still had a sore shoulder, because I had heard that you really didn't pitch in the big leagues without a sore arm. But for a game or two, was it? Tell that story.
It was really how fate enters in sometimes. It's unreal. But Well, I got a start. I mean, I got a relief job the first day I got to join the Dodgers. I was called in relief. I ended up getting the win. So I got the win my first day in the big leagues. And then a few days later, I relieved against the Cardinals, and I got that win. So I had 2 wins in relief. And then they gave me a start against the Cubs in New York at Evans Field. And I'm pitching very well into the 7th inning. I got a lead, and I'm pitching very well. And I threw a fastball to Bill Nicholson, a big left-hand hitter. I struck him out on a high fastball. But I felt this sharp pain in the back of my shoulder, and I'd pulled a muscle. But I was a rookie, and rookies didn't say anything. They didn't go in the trainer's room for sure. And so I finished the game, and now I'm 3-0 with a complete game. And 4 days later, I started against the Phillies. But I was hurting bad. And by the 6th inning, I told Burt Shotten, I said, Mr. Shotten, I hurt my arm in that Cub game, and man, I'm telling you, my arm is killing me. And he said, oh, well, son, listen, you're pitching a shutout now. You just go right ahead and do your job. He wouldn't even listen about being hurt. So I finished that game. I beat the Phillies 2-1. Now I've pitched 2 complete games, and I'm 4-0. So 4 days later, we're in Philly, and it's my turn again. So I start again. I beat the Phillies 8-1. I've had 3 complete games in a row, and I'm 5-0. There was nobody would believe that I was having arm trouble. But I actually did a lot of damage to my shoulder pitching after I pulled that muscle. And so I struggled the next spring and just really fought it. So I never got rid of that problem, but I did learn to pitch around it. And
I was just going to ask you, did you change your delivery?
My old high school coach called me. He saw me pitching on TV one day, and he called me, and he said, what are you doing? You never landed that way. You never finished that way. You always finished in position to field the ball. You finished perfect. Well, what are you doing different? You're doing something different. He's the only one that actually recognized that I was compensating by trying to pitch with this bad shoulder. But anyway, I never wanted to be known as a sore arm pitcher. I never wanted to beg off and say, but I'd have days when I couldn't get loose. Then I'd have days that I did get loose. And so I'd end up pitching I pitched for 11 seasons after.
Oh, yes. I mean,
shoulder, so.
My introduction was down-keyed as if everybody knows it, but you were Oysk.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me Brooklyn, you come to Brooklyn, Midwest kid, if you mind my vernacular. At that time, you really were a kid.
I was 21. Yep.
21. What was Brooklyn like? What was meeting Mr. Rickey like? What was it like right at the beginning?
Well, Mr. Rickey, when he signed me in at the Kenmore Hotel in Boston at the All-Star game in 1946. Now I was only 19, and in those days you had to be 21 to sign a contract. So Mr. Rickey brought my parents to Boston, and we met in his suite in the Kenmore Hotel. And he said to me, son, I guess the Braves are trying to sign you. And I said, yeah, they are, but I don't have any reason to sign the Braves. I'd like to play for the Dodgers. So we signed, and Mr. Rickey gave me a bonus, which is unheard of in those days, to get a cash bonus. But he gave me a bonus, and then I got discharged in a couple of weeks after that and went out to the minor leagues. It was late in the season in 46, so I was only at Danville, Illinois for a very short time, and then the season ended. So I came home to Anderson, Indiana, and I got a call from the commissioner of baseball, who was Happy Chandler, and his office is in Cincinnati. And he said, I want you and your father in my office on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. So we had no idea what was going on. I went down there, and Commissioner Chandler said, son, I'm going to declare you a free agent because the Dodgers violated a directive by signing you before you were discharged from the Navy. And I had a directive out that you can't sign a player until he's free from his military obligation. So the Dodgers violated that, and I'm going to declare a free agent. Well, Mr. Rickey was on the phone. He said, I don't want to lose this boy. And Chandler said, well, I'm going to make an exception. I'm not going to bar the Dodgers from re-signing. If you want to re-sign with the Dodgers, I'm not going to bar them from re-signing it. So I said to Mr. Rickey, I want to play for the Dodgers. But by that time, the Red Sox, the Phillies, the Pirates, that were all offering me money to sign with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, no, I want to play for the Dodgers. And I said, Mr. Rickey, if you'll give me another $5,000, he gave me $3,500 to start. And now this was an era when you didn't get money. There was no cash money paid for bonus.
And $3,500 was big bucks too, right?
My dad worked all year in a General Motors factory in my hometown for less than $3,500 a year. And so now I get $35. Now I say, Mr. Rickey, if you'll give me another $5,000, I'll sign with the Dodgers. And he did. So I got two bonuses. And I was once interviewed by Dizzy Dean, and I just pitched a no-hitter against the Giants, and Dean was interviewing me, and he said, who'd you play for? Who signed you? I said, Branch Rickey. Cheapest man ever lived, he said. I played for him in St. Louis. He's a cheapskate. I said, well, yeah.
You were thinking, no, he's not.
So I said, actually, Mr. Rickey gave me two bonuses. So he turned to the camera, and he says, folks, this here young man deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Not because he pitched two no-hitters. He got two bonuses out of Branch Rickey.
You still with me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I want you to tell me about the late innings of a no-hitter and/or a big game in the World Series. What changes in the dugout? What changes on the mound? And, yeah, why don't you, if you would tell me that?
First of all, I think every pitcher warms up, getting ready to start a Major League game, and he hopes he doesn't allow any hits. That's the ultimate dream of every pitcher. But to reach the ninth inning and be have held the opponent hitless is a rare experience. And so there's nothing to go by. There's nothing in the book that says here's what you do when you get to the ninth inning and you're pitching a no-hitter. You just do what comes natural. You say, I got a pitch at a time, one pitch at a time, one batter at a time. And, of course, against the Cubs in 52, it had rained in the middle of the game, and we had about a 45-minute break, and we played bridge in the clubhouse at the break. And I played with Billy Cox against Pee Wee Reese and Billy Herman, who was one of our coaches. And bridge was a popular game on the Dodgers. And so I just made 4 hearts, and they called us back on the field. And I finished the game. It turned out to be a no-hitter with a bridge game right in the middle, which was pretty unusual.
And 4 hearts showing.
And I made 4 hearts, but anyway, so that was a rare experience.
So you were able to just zen it, if you will, and just put it out of your mind.
You just had to go a pitch at a time. There's no other way to do it. I mean, it's you're out there for a couple hours, and it's a pitch, one pitch after another. Now there weren't too many close base hits in that Cub game. Phil Cavaretta was a coach. He was playing manager of the Cubs at that time, and he was a fine hitter. And he pinch hit in the 8th inning, and he hit the ball the hardest of anybody, but Frillo caught it in deep right center. That was the nearest base hit in the Cub game. But
was Frillo's arm as good as reputed? When Frillo passed away, he was 66 years old. When he passed away, I went to his funeral, and I walked in with Peter O'Malley and Sandy Koufax in Reading, Pennsylvania. We went to his funeral, and we walked in. Carl's wife said to Peter O'Malley, "Would you say a few words at the funeral?" And this was 5 minutes before the funeral started. And Peter O'Malley said, "Well, I think maybe one of his teammates would be more appropriate. Carl, maybe Carl could do that." Oh, gee whiz, 5 minutes. So I didn't have time to think about anything. But here's what I said about Frillo. I saw Frillo do something so rare. I saw him with that throwing arm of his.
I saw him throw runners out at all 4 bases. Now, naturally, he threw guys out at home. He threw guys out at third. He threw guys out at second. But I saw him twice throw a runner out at first base because he didn't hustle. He hit a shot to right field, a base hit, one hop, Frillo would field it, and if the guy wasn't running hard, Frillo would throw him out from right field at first base. I saw him do it twice. So
yes, in answer to my question, it was as good as reputed. Am I correct?
He had great accuracy, and he got rid of the ball quick. And Frillo was very solid. He was a solid hitter. Played every day. He was seldom hurt, and but he had a great accuracy with his throwing. And but anyway, Frillo was known as the Reading Rifle, and it was a good nickname for him.
How about Billy at third?
Billy Cox.
Yes.
Billy Cox.
Was that a vacuum cleaner or what?
He had the quickest hands. You know, Brooks Robinson was one of the great all-time fielders, and Cox was just as good as Robinson, except Robinson was bigger, had a little better reach, so he covered a little more territory than Billy. But Billy was so quick, he made so many stops of hard-hit balls that it just amazed you. And
would you rate Clete Boyer right up there with those two?
Well, I didn't see him play. You know, when you play with somebody every day, it's different than seeing an opponent. Now, right. Boyer was good. There's no question about that. I just didn't get to see him play enough to remember how great he really was. But I saw Cox play every day and make plays, unbelievable plays.
Okay, I got you. I'm going to ask you a question. Sal the Barber Maglie, first the Giants, then comes over to you guys.
Right.
Well, what was that like for all concerned?
Well, you know, Maglie beat us 11 straight times at Evansville. We couldn't beat him, and he beat us. He just shoved the bats, you know where, and we just couldn't hit Maglie.
So
finally, one night game, I pitched against Sal Maglie, and we finally beat him. I finally got a win against Sal Maglie, and then he got traded from the Giants to Cleveland, and he was at Cleveland for a year or two. And one day, Buzzy Bavese called me. He's our general manager, and he said to me, "Carl, what do you think about?" This was 1956. He said, "What do you think about us getting Sal Maglie?" I said, "What? You don't mean it?" Because he used to throw at Ferrello and Campanella and Jackie. He picked those three guys, and he used to knock them down every ball game. He'd throw at these guys, and we hated his guts. I mean, he was the mean as a snake out there. So I said, "Why would we want Maglie?" He said, "Well, Maglie's available at Cleveland," and he said, "I said, is he healthy?" Because he was older, you know, but Maglie had to be in his late 30s by that time. Mm-hmm. So I said, if this guy's healthy, my gosh, he's one of the best professional pitchers in baseball. I always admired him, even though I hated his guts as a Giant. But I admired Maglie, and I admired the chief, Ali Reynolds.
Rashi. Reynolds.
Reynolds. Those two guys would really take charge of a ball game, and I liked that. I needed more of that assurance myself as a pitcher. I wanted to go out there and take charge. Well, Maglie took charge. Well, anyway, we got Maglie, and it was a strange sight to see him in our clubhouse. And here he is in a Dodger uniform. We had to get used to that. But everybody respected Maglie as a pro. He was the ultimate professional. He pitched just as great for us as he had pitched against us. In fact, he pitched a no-hitter in '56 against the Phillies. So I got well acquainted with Sal. I got to be a good friend of his, and always admired him as a real pro. So when he came to the Dodgers, there was no animosity from past experiences. Campy caught him with no problem. Robinson was supportive. Ferrello. Frillo was Italian too, so he had no problem with Maglie.
It all worked out.
Well, it was a respect. It was a professional respect that Maglie was the ultimate professional. And when he came from the Giants to the Cleveland back to us, he fit in, and he helped us. He pitched well, and we won the pennant in '56. And Maglie
he pitched a no-hitter himself, if I recall.
He did, yes, he did. And that was a strange trade, but the fact that he'd been such a great professional, he fit right in with the Dodgers, so it was no problem. What
was it like when DeRocher returned? He Burt Shotten managed, and then DeRocher returned from suspension, and then later on went on to manage the Giants.
Right.
So the rivalry was intensified.
Very intense. Most people can't realize what it was like in those days. There was only 8 teams in the league, so we played the 7 other teams 22 times, 11 at home, 11 on the road. But when we played the Giants, all 22 games were in New York, because 11 to Polo Grounds, 11 to Evans Field. And that rivalry was so intense. It was just, your manhood was on the line. When you were playing the Giants, it was an atmosphere different than any other. Yeah, we battled the Yankees in different World Series, but that was a different kind of feeling. Playing the Giants was professional hatred. I mean, the benches were hot on each other. There was no holds barred, and we had some great series with the Giants. And
later on, when you guys all retired, was there an easing of tension? Was there friendships? I mean, you go to card shows and what have you. Was there ever friendships formed after all that rivalry?
Oh, sure. I got well acquainted with Bobby Thompson and Willie Mays, Monty Irvin, Jim Hearn.
God rest some of their souls.
These guys, I became friends with all those guys off the field and various. Monty Irvin and I got to be very good friends, and we went to some card shows and some other old timers functions together and all. But and Leo, I knew Leo was one of my best boosters when I was in the minors, because he was managing a big club and he was trying to get me to get to the big leagues. So Leo was
and sent out Shotten, you were saying.
Right, and so I tell you what, in the rivalry on the field is one thing, but you meet these guys off the field. There was a professional respect there. I was with Bobby Thompson a number of times after our playing days. And as I mentioned, Jim Hearn was one of their pitchers. I got to be
seemed
very
to have
close.
pitched every game I went to as a kid.
Yeah, right.
Giants.
So at the professional level, very few really hate feelings carry over off the field. On the field, yes, you really professionally you hate it.
Anything about Leo that you remember that maybe we don't know about in terms of his being? I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, good, bad, and indifferent.
Well, Leo was a kind of a guy that he'd chew you out in front of the ball club. You know, they say, well, a manager should never really make you look bad in front of the whole team. Leo didn't care. If you screwed up, if you did a bonehead play, Leo would roast you right in front of everybody. But at the same time, you do something good, you win a ball game for him, you come through in the clutch, you go back to your locker, there's a $50 bill in your shoe, or I mean, Leo just played it that way, and some guys could play for Leo, and some guys couldn't. The guys that played for him loved to play for him. But there were guys that did not like the way Leo, was loud and cussing all the time, and he just dressed you down in front of everybody. But usually you deserved it. But he didn't play any favorites. So I don't know if he ever got on Willie, but anyway.
Could you
Leo was another character in the long Dodger history, New York baseball history, that. But he was a fine manager, good baseball man, and his style with the players, however. And you got to realize this: Leo was a manager when Jackie came up in '47, and he told the team, he said, "You bunch of dummies, this guy's going to help us get off his back. I don't want anybody saying anything bad about Robinson. He is a good player, and we need him. And by God, if you don't shut up and don't talk about race or anything else, help this guy." And he did. He got in Jackie's corner and made it work.
Okay. Can you tell me about Gil Hodges not being in the Hall of Fame? Is there anything to explain that in any kind of rationality at all?
There's a ton of stories about how close Gil has come and then didn't quite make it. And one of them is that Ted Williams, for a long time, was on the Veterans Committee, and he thought the Dodgers had too many guys in the Hall of Fame already. He was not an advocate of Gil getting in. It's hard to explain. Gil's come close several times. If you compare his numbers to a couple other guys, you'd say, gee whiz, why shouldn't he be in there? But he's never quite got enough votes. And now they only get to vote on a player every 2 years, and they just can put one off of the old-timers list in every 2 years. So it gets tougher and tougher for him to make it. I always felt like that sooner or later he would. When they changed the format and they had former players on the Veterans Committee and guys like Aaron who'd played against Hodges, I thought this is going to help Gil because these are the guys that actually saw him play. But he still didn't quite get enough votes. And the story goes that Campy was on the committee, but that's when he was in a wheelchair and couldn't travel very easily. And the story goes, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but that Campy had to send in a written ballot one time because he couldn't make it on the plane because of his the wheelchair. He wasn't well enough to go. But he sent his vote in, but they wouldn't count it. The committee chairman, whoever, wouldn't count his vote because he was not present, and that he needed that vote, Gil did, to make it. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true, but that's come down through the years. And I don't know what will finally happen here. I think it's tougher and tougher for Gil as the time passes, but there could be some. I've written letters. Other people have written letters to the committee, laying out Gil's record, and yet he just has not gotten enough votes. But they often said about Pee Wee, as kind of an emphasis on Pee Wee, that he played alongside Jackie. Well, so did Hodges play alongside Jackie on the other side. And he kept the peace on the infield in those early years because with Jackie playing second base, there was always a lot of action around second and a lot of body contact sometime on sliding plays and things. And there were many times a fight would be right on the brink of breaking out around second, and Hodges would be the guy to keep the peace and keep Jackie out of a brawl of some kind. So, but none of that counts. They look at his stats, and this is just the way it is. So
okay.
I'm disappointed.
How about Duke and Willie? Any comparisons? I mean, as you well know, Duke hit more home runs than anybody else in the 50s.
Right. Well, Duke was always second fiddle a little bit in New York because DiMaggio was still playing when Duke. Duke came up in 48, I believe, 47, 48. And he had a strikeout problem early. He couldn't lay off a high fastball, but he finally learned to hit and lay off with a bad pitch. But so he struggled a little bit as a young player. But DiMaggio had such press in New York, and when he retired, Mantle took his place eventually, and then Willie was such a fantastic player himself, and both of those center fields were huge center fields, so those center fielders could run forever and make a catch. Well, Duke couldn't do that at Ebbets Field. Ebbets Field wasn't that big, and so his center field play was never recognized but he made some of the greatest plays on the road and in the World Series. So, but Duke finally got his due. I was at Shea Stadium one year, I forget what year it was, at an old-timers game, and they introduced all of us, and we're standing out on the field, and then it said, direct your attention to the center field gate, and in walks 4 players.
I have a picture
DiMaggio,
of that.
Mantle, yes. Mays, and Snyder.
Right.
And it said, here's the 4 of the greatest center fielders ever to play the game of baseball.
Now you saw it from them coming forward. I have a picture of them walking the other way from center field in.
Right.
That had to make even a pro like you tingle just a little bit.
Listen, I roomed with Duke Snyder for 10 seasons. He and I were very, very close as brothers. I pitched against DiMaggio. I pitched against Mays. I pitched against Mantle. But when those 4 guys walked in, I got chills up my back. I wanted to run out and get their autograph. I mean, that was a fantastic show of one of the premier moments in my baseball career, was to see these 4 greats, all Hall of Famers, walk in stride for stride together in the outfield. That was a big moment.
Nice that you can think in terms of other people's accomplishments as your big moment, as opposed to dwelling on your myriad of big moments along the way. You're a gentleman, my friend. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. It was wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Erskine.
Been kind to call me. I always appreciate remembering, and I'm
my godfather Tony D'Angelo will be in touch with you very shortly.
I got a surprise for you.
Yes.
You got a minute?
Sure.
How would you like to hear the Bye Bye Dodger Blues?
Oh, I forgot. I asked you, please. Oh, would I ever? Thank you, Mr. Erskine. Mr. Erskine on the mouth organ, ladies and gentlemen. Whoa.
What do you think?
Whoa, I think I was expecting Mary Had a Little Lamb. So you can't be that talented in 2 different venues. That is not fair, Mr. Erskine.
Well, that's my hobby.
I better call you Oysk. You played for me. Then let me ask you about the borough before you go. If you have one more minute, about the borough of Brooklyn and why that is like no other place on earth.
Well, you mentioned how young we were, and our families were small. We raised our kids in Brooklyn. They went to school in Brooklyn. Now, we didn't live there all year round because we were on 1-year contracts. So you wouldn't buy a house where you played because you didn't know what would happen the next year. But Betty and I, my wife, of 68 years, incidentally, we've been married 68 years, and Betty went through the whole thing with me. But I had 2 little boys in Brooklyn, and the neighbors in Bay Ridge, where I lived, on Lafayette Walk, Duke lived nearby, Pee Wee, in the summer, just the summertime. But we'd go home after a ball game, and we'd win a big ball game, and they'd have a street party. They had balloons in the trees, and the kids, and they'd have a dance. Somebody would be playing an instrument. We just were accepted. Like my hometown of Anderson, Indiana, is 35,000 people, but it's a small town in Indiana. But Brooklyn, Bay Ridge, was like a hometown. It was the babysitters and the guys in the deli, the barber shop, special cops. I mean, we played together for a decade or longer. So that nucleus of that team stayed together for 10 or 12 years. So Brooklyn was just like a hometown to me. And I still get so much mail from around or meet people all over the country who are from Brooklyn. And so It lasted all these years. I can't believe it. Still lasted so many years. But it was a special time, and I think Brooklyn was a borough. It was kind of the orphan borough in New York. It didn't have the glitz of Broadway and Uptown, Manhattan, city of churches, all the and a mixed ethnic group in a lot of
ethnicity,
nationalities in Brooklyn. And I think Mr. Rickey must have been very wise to bring Jackie into baseball in Brooklyn, because it was such a mixed ethnic group. I think it just didn't have a negative impact at all. And so So Brooklyn,
But yet on the road, like Philadelphia, St. Louis, could you hit on some stories of what poor Jackie had to go through?
Well, it's a history. Everybody now knows Jackie got treated like a second-class citizen when he was out of uniform and just a black man in America when he was on the street in those early years. People wouldn't remember that two ballparks in the National League were actually segregated. Cincinnati and St. Louis, black fans could not sit in the regular stands. They'd sit in the outfield in the bleachers, the pavilion. And that happened and it took 7 years for all the hotels to accept black players. The Chase in St. Louis was the last hotel to accept black players. And by that time, we had 6 black players, because Campy had come up, Newcomb had come up, Ambrose, Gilliam, Joe Black.
Ambrose.
And we had 6 players. And they finally, Jackie came up in 47, and it took till 1954. That was the last hotel, was the Chase in St. Louis. Finally, it took 7 years before the last hotel accepted black guests. So Jackie suffered all these indignities, but still played great. And in the decade from 47 to 57, this team that had won only now and then won 6 National League championships in that decade. And that was Jackie. Jackie energized that team. But, no, he suffered a lot of indignities, and there's no record anywhere that Jackie ever fought or caused problems, trouble in a parking lot, in a restaurant, any place. He did contain himself, even though he was absolutely treated with no respect for a number of years, till finally people realized, and the momentum that Jackie created of people now accepting people who are different, that momentum's still going on. I mean, Jackie started...
One final question. Jackie sliding into Yogi. Safe her out.
Oh, yeah, that was never proved. Well, it was proved, because Bill Summers was the umpire. He said,
he called him.
He said he's safe. And Yogi
called him safe.
But
Yogi went crazy.
That's right.
Yogi went crazy. Hey, Mr. Erkine, thank you, sir. One of the highlights of my life now.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody out there, Carl Erskine, ladies and gentlemen, keep it going. Thank you, sir.
Pal.
Adios.